You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Again, welcome to the Safe Senior Hour. Joe Gavalis here. I hope you're all doing well. It's always nice to be back. We just had some bad storms, and I'm looking forward to getting back this week, getting back in business here, helping to fight elder abuse here. I have a huge presentation to be coming up over in eastern Georgia, and then some with some seniors later in North Georgia. So things are moving, people are listening, and more importantly, we're educating, and that's what this radio show's about. The Safe Senior Hour. Member here is trying to get people to help get educated, and then educated their friends, their relatives, their loved ones about the aspects of elder abuse. And as you know, as we talk about elder abuse, we talk about three kinds: physical, financial, and institutional. And it's important that we're all aware of each and every one of them. As you know, the senior generation is elder generation is the fastest growing population. And so we need to look out for each other and need to help each other, the few that have been abused, either physically, financially, or institutionally. Remember, you always can email us at safe@americaswebradio.com. Any comments, suggestions, or topics you'd like us to discuss. Today, it's basically we're going to do a catch-up, a review on some topics. As always, we like to update everybody on the latest frauds that have been taking place and successes in prosecuting them. And as I'm looking at one here, it is a successful prosecution in Rhode Island, where a Rhode Island resident admitted participation in an international telemarketing scam targeting elderly citizens. It goes on to say that the victims were all elderly victims in the United States. And the gentleman who was arrested would lead the way in contacting the victims by telephone to believe they have won or parties in a lottery sweepstakes. However, they were told their winnings will not be released to them without upfront payment of taxes or fees. Remember, that's one of the items we tell everybody to be careful about, is that if you win something and you're required to pay upfront fees, taxes, or whatever it is, don't do it. If they want you to continue, they would take the money out of your winnings. So please don't fall for these frauds, but they're very common. Apparently, the individual had at least 20 victims, and they were using the United States postal packages of MoneyGrams and Western Union to transfer money. Among the payments was a check for $25,000, where people got that bold and took it. And that, of course, these documents and these items that the law enforcement can pinpoint and locate help in any prosecution of these perpetrators. The federal government says almost anyone under the right circumstances can fall for a phony offer or promotion. However, older Americans are usually more susceptible than others. That was from the inspector in charge of the U.S. Postal Inspection Division Boston service. Scammers lure victims in with promises of large financial winnings that are hard to turn down. The financial devastation some victims face is irreversible. This is very true. I was up in in North Georgia, Tennessee area, where a woman told me about her sister honestly believed that she won the Publishing Clearinghouse sweepstakes, even though she didn't play it. She got a phone call, said she won it, and was so sure she won it that she saw it on television, how they come and they meet you at the door and they have balloons and present these giant checks, and she was so sure that she had won it. But when in reality, it was a scam. She's had to pay up, she was into about $40,000 on upfront fees. And as we tell everybody, as long as you're willing to pay money, the scammers are willing to constantly deal with you. In this case, after they told her she won the sweepstakes, that they even have better news for her, that not only did she win the sweepstakes, she won a brand new Mercedes automobile. But it's one of these, these big Mercedes that cost well over $100,000, and advised her she needed to pay approximately $20,000 in upfront fees, making her out about $60,000. And when her relative talked to her, she was so sure that any day now, people will be at her door with the balloons, with the big check, and more importantly, they'll drive up in our brand new Mercedes. It took a lot of meeting with the woman from both the professionals, from her relatives, and other loved ones that she trusted, and finally convinced her that this was a scam. So, people want to believe what they want to believe. $60,000 is a lot of money. It was a lot of money to this woman. But again, it was these fraudsters prey on seniors, because seniors, as we talked about before, our generation is very trusting. Number one, our generation has been able to save a little bit of money, whether it's actual cash in a bank, money through investments, or just, as I had somebody in the mountains tell me, they got a little box full of money that nobody can find for that special day or that special thing, especially to take care of their grandkids, which brings up the third item about the seniors, and elderly, is that they're very family-oriented and love their family, love their kids, but really love their grandkids. And the fraudsters play on that. But here's an example. This is a Jamaican lottery that they used as the vehicle to scam this woman, and the perpetrator luckily admitted in federal court to the scam. So as we can see, as people are actively working these type scams, and that's in the United States. But let's go to around the world. This is one in Singapore. We have spoken over and over again about romance scams, and how they're not just in your town, your area. They're all over the world, and that you're not alone if you've been scammed, or your relative is not alone if you hear about them being scammed. Here it is, the headlines out of out of Singapore. Singapore woman makes $36,000 off a love scammer, and then loses it to another scammer. And the interesting point about this is that this woman pleaded guilty to spending cash that a love scammer had deposited into her bank account from scams that she fell for herself, meaning that she was the part-time English teacher claimed that a thief on a bike stole her money and asked for help to pay rent. She also said, according to the arrangement where she pled guilty, that she was supposed to keep a certain amount of money from a check that was given to her to deposit in her account and then pay the money to some other people. This is just another form of the scams where people are just taken in by people who they think are the one, or somebody that they've fall in love with over the computer. So just be careful, but this shows you it can take place in all over the world. In fact, in this case, they asked a woman in Singapore to deposit the money in a Malaysian bank. So it is obviously a worldwide issue. We all should be aware of it. We need to address the issue. It happens more than we think. And I think that the activity of law enforcement working together has helped stop or help educate the seniors and help stop, to a certain extent, some of these crimes from being committed. People are coming out. Remember, the estimate is only one in every five frauds perpetrated on the elderly ever gets reported. So that means 4 people are being defrauded and nobody knows about, or the law enforcement doesn't know about it. So I think that we need to constantly look and try to improve our education and try to help people. California, in the United States, the California Attorney General gets 1.5 million judgment against 7 telemarketers who called investment fraud victims claiming falsely they could get their money back. Well, as we've always said, that there are three lists that fraudsters maintain. And we get this from people who work on the inside or who are arrested or who come forward and give information. One is a list that I hope everybody's on. It's a list where the phone is not answered and they won't talk to you. Remember, we tell everybody, if you don't know the telephone number, you don't recognize it, please wait and see what message they leave. If they don't leave a message, it wasn't that important. And when you listen to the message and they say they're with X, Y, and Z company or XYZ police department or XYZ federal agency, you independently call that agency and said you just got a call from X, Y, and Z. It's important because people can claim who they are over a phone on a recording, and it probably is not true. So remember that. If anything of significance, usually will come through the mail in an official letterhead, and where you can independently call back to, for example, the IRS scam. You can deal with the IRS as an individual. IRS is not going to call you. So in this case here, these are people who will promise to get the money back, and because they've heard that you've been scammed. And remember, once you're scammed, you then go on another list, and that's the big list, because they figure if you paid money once, you'll pay it again. So with that, we'll take our break from our first segment on the Safe Senior Hour.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
This is Ron Camacho, host of the Business Hour, on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Join me as I talk with passionate professionals on a program that profiles the best businesses, business professionals, business practices, and fascinating individuals to get an insider view of how America works. 10 to 11 a.m. on America's Web Radio.
This is Dr. Susan Blank, host of Detailing Addiction and medical director of the Atlanta Healing Center. Please join me on Tuesday afternoons at 4 p.m.
Get your pen and paper ready. If there's a move in your near future, I'm here to tell you that the folks I used and now recommend is Around Town Movers. Timothy and the guys recently moved me, and I am and was totally satisfied with a sometimes not so fun experience moving. Call Timothy at 770-378-4708 and make it a good move and a good experience. Around Town Movers for that local or cross-country move. Timothy, Around Town Movers, in my opinion, are the best. That's Around Town Movers. Call them.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Well, welcome back to the second segment of the Safe Senior Hour. In the first hour, we've been trying to summarize some of the fraud activities that have been going on. And today we're going to go over some various items that we're looking just to update concerning the abuse that affect the elderly. Remember, that's as we have narrowed it down to three: physical, financial, and institutional abuse. And so we like to go through every once in a while and just rehash things for people and go over, and for our listeners, maybe some new listeners, what they need to look for here. We're right now trying to update some matters that have been happening dealing with the various financial frauds that are going on. And we again thank our friend Steve Baker from the Baker Fraud Report. And I encourage you all to Google and sign up for the Baker Fraud Report. It gives you a good summary for what's going on around the world here. We just got a notification here on the that I believe it was in California, that they've added another defendant to the to a big case they made dealing with posing as IRS agents in the tax fraud. And as you remember, the tax financial fraud scheme is people are posing, whether you're in the United States, Great Britain, Australia, all over the world, that they represent the taxing organization and that they are calling you to say you owe money or you haven't paid your taxes, and they can handle the situation if you paid an upfront money, or they'll come out and arrest you. Well, the reality is nobody's going to come out and arrest you. That people don't call and tell you they're going to arrest you. They will, if they're going to arrest you, going to arrest you. I'm a retired federal agent, and nowhere do you call people and say, I'm coming out to arrest you. Because I'm sure if I called most of you and said, are you coming out to arrest you, a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to be here. I just looked, just got some information here that we were talking about romance scams before that were going on in Singapore. And we come up here and say 8 Chicago area residents are among 10 individuals charged as part of an international investigation into online fraud schemes, including romance scams. The Chicago-based investigation, dubbed Operation Goldfish, and that's spelled P-H-I-S-H rather than F-I-S-H. And fish means, that fishing. It means they're out there just throwing out bait, throwing out fraudulent statements, fraudulent lies to get people to buy into these scams. The Chicago-based Operation Goldfish identified a variety of cyber-enabled fraud schemes allegedly carried out by individuals in the United States and Nigeria. one of the schemes, romance scams, in which the defendant builds trust with a victim through a purported online romance before convincing the victim to send money to a predetermined recipient. The defendants contacted victims via websites such as Match.com, Facebook, and Instagram. And again, this can be equally male and female victims, and I've spoken to both, and it's very, very concerning to hear how these victims got conned into believing, number one, that somebody on the internet who they never met, never saw, getting conned to send them money. Another cyber, and we've spoke on this briefly in a previous show, another cyber-enabled fraud allegedly carried out by the defendants involved a mystery shopper scam, in which the victims were fraudulently offered opportunity to receive commissions for evaluating services such as Western Union and MoneyGram. The victims received a check with instructions to deposit in their bank account, withdraw the money in cash, and wire it to a predominantly third party. The check turned out to be fake, and the victims were defrauded of the money they had written or withdrawn from their accounts, the charges alleged. Remember, here's how it goes, whether it's this way or not. You get sent out of the blue a check saying you've been selected, or there's a phone call followed up with a check for you to deposit it in your account, then withdraw money, and in this case, wire it to another individual. Now, the check you might have received was for, let's say, $10,000. They asked you to withdraw $5,000 and send it to these other areas. So therefore, you get to keep $5,000. They get $5,000. The problem is, as the allegations are, that the check wasn't any good, and you are out of $5,000 that came out of your account. And this is the mystery shopper scam. It happens that way. This is just one of the varieties. 9 of the defendants were originally charged last year with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and they added a 10th. The original defendants, 9 are in law enforcement custody, 8 in the United States and 1 in Nigeria. This case was worked by the U.S. Postal Service, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and with assistance by the Nigerian Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and is being prosecuted in the Chicago area. They have they used another scam that was alleged in the indictment, and this scam or scheme is known as a business email compromise. The defendants fraudulently obtained usernames and passwords or sent spoofing email messages to employees claiming to be from a known business contact, instructing victims to change the wire instructions for bank payment. The charges alleged. Per the instructions given in the fraudulent emails, the victim then unknowingly wired funds to a bank account controlled by, in this case, the defendants. And that had been opened in a fictitious name using a fake passport in this case. In other words, people came in out of the blue, sent to employees that we've been instructed from their headquarters for you to go change the number, change the banking routing, send it to this account, as we decided to improve our financial stability. And the money goes in, and that account is a bogus account set up by people using fraudulent documents, in this case, a fake passport. So you've got to remember, you've got to be on the lookout out there that if something sounds too good to be true or sounds unusual, be skeptical and check it. Especially when we're dealing here with seniors who want to believe. And a lot of seniors, by the way, as you know, and you can just look at your friends and relatives, that they tend to be lonely. They might be living alone. Nobody calls them. They think that nobody cares until they get this magical phone call, and this phone call all of a sudden just solves their money problem, or somebody's willing to talk to them, or it gives them hope that there'll be a relationship at the end of the phone call, and it'll carry on. And that has to do with a lot of people being lonely or have little interaction with other people. It's interesting when I was at a seminar listening about financial scams dealing with sweepstakes and lottery scams. And the investigators made a big point saying rural areas are targeted by the scamsters. They do that because they feel that there won't be the sophistication in the local police in the real rural area, and that if there is, there'll be so many cases for so few police officers that nobody will really get involved investigating it, versus working around a large metropolitan area. So I had some people when I was speaking up in some mountain communities asked me, are they being targeted? And now after listening to that, I can honestly say, yes, you are being targeted, your area. Your name just happens to be on a list that they bought. There's no other reason to think there's anything different about that. But where you live, to some of these fraudsters, does mean a big deal. Because if they can get you conned and not have to worry that much about enforcement of any fraudulent, of any federal, state, or local laws, they're just going to do it. They're more inclined to take the route that's the easiest to go, like anybody else. I think we have to remember constantly, these people are in for the money. They're not in to help you. They're not in to help anybody. They're in there to get the money. It's all about the money. And that's why they set up these rooms where they sit there and they just have 10, 20, 30. I heard in one of these countries, it can be as sophisticated as renting a big kind of warehouse, and they've set up 50 or 100 phones, and they have people calling. They have these lists because they're trying to generate money. And all it takes is 1 out of every 10, 1 out of every 100. The money comes in, and remember, these are fraudsters, and it's tax-free, and they come in. So just be careful, be safe. Remember, if it's too good to be true, it is. So with that, we're going to end this second segment of the Safe Senior Hour, and look forward to speaking to you on the next segment.
This is Ron Camacho, host of the Business Hour, on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Join me as I talk with passionate professionals on a program that profiles the best businesses, business professionals, business practices, and fascinating individuals to get an insider view of how America works. 10 to 11 a.m. on America's Web Radio.
45 years of experience is behind the most trusted name in auto transportation. Passport Transport, the first and finest today. That's why Passport Transport is the preferred auto transport for major auto manufacturers, concours, museums, tours, and collectors, and should be your choice from across the state to across the country. When you have the need, go to PassportTransport.com and enjoy the peace of mind referenced experience will give you. Passport Transport.
The disease of addiction is a life-altering challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also for the family and friends who support and love the one caught in its grasp. What should be the course of treatment? Who is the best person to render treatment? And what is the best place to go for the care that is needed? We know that you want answers to these and many more questions. Call 770-696-9862 and speak to a representative of the Atlanta Healing Center. They can tailor a program specifically designed to address the needs of the person suffering with an addiction, or give you guidance as to where that help may be found. Information is the key, and the trained staff at AHC is here to assist. If you wish, you can also get more information on the website located at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the third segment of the Safe Senior Hour. Joe Gavalis here. Excuse me. Today we're just doing a summary, trying to get an update on the financial issues, frauds that are taking place, and then just a general overview again of for the seniors that are listening in the United States and around the world, issues about elder abuse that affects people everywhere, wherever you live, or could affect them. We define elder abuse in our group, the North Georgia Elder Abuse Task Force, as physical, financial, and institutional. The elder abuse victims often live in silence, desperation, unwilling to seek assistance because they unfortunately believe their cries for help will go unanswered, and they fear retaliation from their abusers. Many of them, the abusers will stay silent to protect family members from legal consequences of their crime, or too embarrassed to admit they've fallen victims to predators. And the other one is that people believe, especially when you deal with physical and sexual crimes against the elderly, others fear that no one will believe them, and that it's people might think you're just that because of their age and because of other issues that they're not believable. So this is why we're asking, caring family members, friend, or caretaker to take any action and bring it to the professionals, to the attention before these things get out of hand and people either get hurt physically or financially. The problem of elder abuse has really been identified and grown in terms of knowledge by both law enforcement and social services, and they have expanded dramatically to meet the growing need. There are people out there who will help you. So if you know of a friend, a loved one, a relative, that there's an indication that there's some abuse or neglect, please feel free to call a professional, call a local law enforcement, call the Adult Protective Service in your area. They will be able to get help. As we spoke before, we identify elder abuse as basically in three areas: of physical, emotional elder abuse, financial abuse, and then of course institutional. And people ask me as I give talks all around the state or the southeast here, what is physical and emotional elder abuse? Well, physical abuse, and we don't talk that much about it, but it can be obviously a physical assault, a sexual assault, or unreasonable physical constraint. I've heard cases where people are actually tied down in their beds where they can't get up, so that the caretaker or loved one can go outside and go out. In one case we had here, the paid caretaker locked the resident in his room from a lock on the outside. She left with her boyfriend and was found behind a big, huge, big block store, drinking and cavorting in an automobile with her boyfriend, while the person she's supposed to be taking care of is locked in, had no way to get out. You need a bolt cutter to get out. She used a big lock. So that would be clearly a sign of abuse. prolonged deprivation of food or water. It's a sad situation when you see it or you hear about it, but if you hear any indications from a loved one that they haven't gone to get help, they need to do it. And again, the inappropriate use of physical or chemical restraint. I know there was a case where they stopped a relative who just didn't want to care for the senior anymore, just kept the senior so drugged that it was basically just lying in bed all day while this person just in the downstairs area just took care of her personal business, leave the house, would lock them into the room. So we need to be be aware of this, or if you hear of it, to bring it to the authorities and adult protective services. There was other issues, neglect issues, failure to assist in personal hygiene, failure to provide clothing and shelter, failure to provide medical care, failure to protect from health and safety hazards, and failure to prevent malnutrition and dehydration. And then there's always self-neglect, where somebody lives alone and just can't take care of themselves. Again, not all these issues would necessarily be a criminal issue, but they certainly are red flags where you should call the professionals to let them look at it, evaluate the situation, and let them make the appropriate decision. The last thing we want is some senior to be suffering through pain because of neglect, and somebody outside of that person's home knew about it but failed to report it. Another issue that happens and that we hear about frequently is emotional abuse. And emotional abuse, and the example that's always given is like verbal assaults, threats, or intimidation, subjecting an individual to fear, isolation, or serious emotional distress, withholding of emotional support, and just total confinement where nobody has access to them. The case I'm familiar with is a son, the son who's in his 40s, constantly told his mother if she doesn't sign this check, which happened to be for substantial amounts of money to pay the son, or pay for the son's truck, or pay for the son's activity. Again, the son's 40, 50 years old. That the son has no other recourse but put the mother in a nursing home, which is the last thing they want. So he's using the fear, the intimidation of her to get something out that she doesn't necessarily want to pay or should pay, but this is how the money is obtained, through this intimidation factor. Now, how do you, as a friend or a relative that only sees the person sparingly, I guess, what are some recognizing the warning signs? And again, the existence of any one or more of the following ones I'm going to talk about does not mean that abuse has occurred. Instead, treat them as signs that diligent attention or investigation is needed. And again, investigation will be done by the professionals, whether it's law enforcement or it's adult protective services. They need to be made aware of. And some of these things to look for as you go out and you visit your neighbor, you visit your loved ones, you visit your relative. Uncombed or matted hair, poor skin condition or hygiene, unkempt or dirty, patches of hair missing or a bleeding scalp, any untreated medical conditions, malnourished or dehydrated, foul smelling, torn or body clothing or undergarments, scratches, blisters, laceration or pinch marks, unexplained bruises or welts, burns caused by scalding water, cigarettes, or ropes, injuries that are incompatible with explanations, any injuries that reflect an outline of, an example, a belt cord or a hand cord. These are things to look for. As we said, doesn't mean anything is absolutely wrong, but it means get it to a professional. Get people to look at it. These are things that we don't want our loved ones, we don't want our elderly to have to go through. Does this happen? Absolutely. I was talking to somebody again in one of the senior meetings I had, who talks about the hiring of an outside person or a loved one who lives with that elderly, who fails to take care of these situations, needs to be brought to the attention of law enforcement or adult protection or both. This is a sad situation, and it can only get worse. And it's very common to see people. I know I talk about the case where the neighbor finally realized they had to do something. They hadn't seen this woman in several weeks, and happened to go over and looked at her, and she was laying in bed in her human waste and had these sores on her from laying in bed that were just absolutely horrible. They had heard about it. They had seen this earlier before at a lesser stage, and they went home and said, we've got to do something about it. So they called the local sheriff. The sheriff went in, called for code enforcement to come, obviously called for an ambulance, went in, got into the house on a welfare check, said that the smell and the condition was so bad that they had to wear air mask, and get the woman out and get her to a hospital for her safety. It is this kind of situation where the neighbor said, I wished I told the law enforcement earlier what was going on. But at least she finally told her, and so this got the woman out, got her some help, got her up to a hospital. The downside is the home was so bad, the son who was coming every week to take care of her obviously didn't report this to anybody, did not improve the sanitary conditions, and the county came in with the smell and reeking and the condition of the house, basically just quarantined the house, and said nobody could live there till all this got cleaned up. So here's a woman got taken out of her house because nobody was taking care of her. She couldn't do it, and she's in the hospital, her getting herself taken care of, and all she wants to do is go home. That's all she said. She wants to live at home, and now the home is condemned because of the horrible health conditions which affect not only her but the other neighbors. It is a sad state of affairs when things like this take place, and so if you know of anything, if you see anything, please go ahead and call the professionals, law enforcement, adult protective services. You can make a difference. And remember, elder abuse doesn't report itself, and it is an issue that we need to be aware of, especially with our seniors that are around us. It is a horrible situation. So with that, I'm going to close down segment 3, and we will be going into 4, and we'll continue our review of abuses and what you can do about it. Again, Joe Gavalis on the Safe Senior Hour.
The disease of addiction is a life-altering challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also for the family and friends who support and love the one caught in its grasp. What should be the course of treatment? Who is the best person to render treatment? And what is the best place to go for the care that is needed? We know that you want answers to these and many more questions. Call 770-696-9862 and speak to a representative of the Atlanta Healing Center. They can tailor a program specifically designed to address the needs of the person suffering with an addiction, or give you guidance as to where that help may be found. Information is the key, and the trained staff at AHC is here to assist. If you wish, you can also get more information on the website located at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
This is Ron Camacho, host of the Business Hour, on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Join me as I talk with passionate professionals on a program that profiles the best businesses, business practices, and fascinating business professionals to get an insider view of how America works.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Well, welcome back to the final hour on the Safe Senior. Final segment on the Safe Senior Hour. Joe Gavalis here, and remember, as we always say, elder abuse doesn't report itself. And if you have any questions, updates, comments, or items you want us to talk about, please send us a email at safe@americaswebradio.com. It is our topic today is we're trying to just go through and update some of the issues we talked about, fraud and what to do and what to look for, and when and how to report it. We're talking about, as we said, we look at three different types of abuse: physical, financial, and institutional. And we're spending most of this last segment and this segment on physical abuse. Things to look at, things that you need. It doesn't mean if you see this, it means that somebody's going to do something immediately. But you need to make these issues aware to the police, law enforcement, and or adult protective services of the United States, or the appropriate one throughout in your country. Behavioral warning signs that we should look for. Seniors that all of a sudden become withdrawn, confused, or extremely forgetful, very depressed, helpless, or angry. Hesitant to talk freely is an important sign. If you see a notice that people talk differently when their caregiver or loved one who's taking care of them is around versus when they're alone. I know that happens many times. We've had people say constantly, you need to talk to XYZ alone. Don't ask the questions when her caregiver's there, or her loved one that's supposed to be doing it, or the paid caregiver. And especially if people seem frightened, and you can tell, you can judge, and the professionals certainly can tell. To isolate the elder is a tool used by many abusers. And that's to keep them from any real contact with the outside world other than just the caregiver. And again, let me say this, almost all caregivers, loved ones, are fine people, honest people that aren't there abusing anybody. God bless them for taking care of our seniors, and we appreciate it. But there are the cases that there are abusers, and we certainly need to make people aware of things to look for. Remember, when they're isolated, the victim is eventually driven to distrust friends, doctors, and even close family members. So they rely solely on that one caregiver to take care of all their needs, and everybody else that they just kind of shun. Be aware of that, because if people do that, now they become totally dependent on one person. That's why they need outside contact. So your visits, your calls are just great. Family members or caregivers have isolated the elder, restricting the elder's contact, including visitors from doctors, clergy, or friends. We've had cases here where people call up and say, we want to come over and see Sarah. We haven't seen Sarah or Jim. And they will say, well, they're busy right now, or they've got to go to the doctor. And call after call, there's an excuse where you never can get to their house or residence to see the person. And then the other big red flag, and police and law enforcement look for this, as does APS, is they're not given the seniors not given the opportunity to speak freely without the care being present. And that happens. especially when you see bruises and things like that. If the caregiver's there, and the caregiver, it might have been a legitimate bruise. Somebody might have honestly fallen, but also could be somebody grabbed the senior or did some physical contact. But the senior, with the person who did it, is sitting right there, is not going to open up and be honest with you. So, anytime you can have an opportunity to speak alone with the senior, you'll get a better idea of what's happening. But remember, we talked about it, and we have to say any person who suspects abuse should report it. The idea, the worst case scenario I could see would be going home in bed at night and waking up and finding abusive action caused serious damage or even death to somebody who you knew was being abused physically, but you just didn't want to get involved, and to know you could have possibly done something. And all we're asking is to call anonymously, talk to your law enforcement, talk to Adult Protective Services, whatever it takes to get the message through. There is a elder that might have some issues, or bring it to your attention. Let the professionals do their job. The point is that the abuse can continue and often escalates if there's no intervention. It should be reported immediately. Well, just stop to think about it. If you get away with something early on, you're going to continue doing it. And if you're doing it, it can escalate and the condition gets worse and worse and worse. So if you get a chance, please report it early. Now, if you're in a institution, a long-term care, you have various choices to report what you think are any of the suspicious-looking activity for physical abuse, or the isolation or emotional abuse. And that is, you can go to, and we've had them on our show, the long-term care ombudsmen. They should be in every long-term care facility. They should be posted how you get in touch with them. They are a organization that will remain the information will remain confidential unless it's approved. But at least they can then talk about the general topic with the appropriate people, or obviously local law enforcement that deal with any kind of abuse, be it physical, be it institutional, be it financial. And then, of course, if it's dealing with maybe Medicare, you can report it to the federal government, the Medicare. The reporting person on all these reporting things is protected from both criminal and civil liability in many areas. So we kind of covered that. It's been significant. It's a significant issue, the physical, emotional, institutional signs. We talk about the other type of abuse, or two other, obviously. We just talked physical. We talked financial. And the idea of financial abuse deals with the theft or embezzlement of money or other personal property from the elder. Now, that can be by as simple as taking money from a wallet, as complex as manipulating a victim and turning over a property to an abuser. This form of abuse can be devastating because elder victims' life savings can disappear in a blink, leaving them unable to provide for their own care. Now, as we talk about that, the vast majority, that's the biggest abuse going on against seniors, is financial abuse. The biggest abuser are loved ones, home, personal care people that are trusted by the senior, and they come in and they then financially either manipulate the person or can get into the accounts. Not all of them, Most caregivers are fine people, but where you hear or see some possible abuse, please make sure you report it. And it can be from that small: people stealing out of a wallet, people stealing. We've had cases where caretakers have gone to the back of a checkbook and ripped out checks and constantly cash those checks because the senior doesn't balance the checkbook and doesn't know, because on the front of the checks, check 1051 is there, 1052, 1053. But what you don't realize is the person went in the back of the checkbook and got 1060, 65, 66, 67 and been writing them. And because nobody balances the checkbook, that can be that can go undetected for a long time. Some signs we should look at as we start to wrap up the last segment that we should look at for financial abuse: unusual bank account activity, such as withdrawals from automatic teller machines when the individual can't go to the bank; signatures on checks and other documents that don't resemble the elder's signature; checks or other documents signed when the elder cannot write or understand what he or she is signing. You see that many times with people with dementia, that they'll start and they'll get confused, and people will say, just sign here, and they think the people think they're signing for X, but they're really signing for Y. Lack of personal amenities, appropriate clothing and grooming items. When a person isn't being taken care of and there are issues about what the money is being spent, look at it. For example, if you see money being spent at a grocery store on somebody's credit card or a debit card, and alcohol's on the bill, and the person, the elderly, doesn't drink, that money, her money, can't be used to benefit somebody else like that. So again, alone it might not mean a lot, but you put it together and you needed to get it to the professionals, the law enforcement, adult protective services. Also look for any numerous unpaid bills when someone else has been designated to pay the bills. Meaning somebody comes in that might have the power of attorney to write bills or to handle it, that be careful there. And again, always look for a change in spending patterns, such as how the person buys, and also an appearance of a stranger who begins a new close relation and offers to manage the elder's finances. With that, this is the end of our today's session. But remember, elder abuse doesn't report itself, and look forward to speaking with you next week.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
This is Ron Camacho.